Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I'm going to be telling you about the day that God spoke to me. I'll have to give you some background information so you kind of understand what was going on or where I was at and why. So I was born in 1976. It wasn't the best circumstances by far. I learned my father had committed suicide when I was about a year old. I learned that really early on. It was very hard to deal with. A lot of questions. You know, a child can't really understand those sort of things. My mother was also very sick. She was an alcoholic, and her body, even at the point when I was very young, was deteriorating. It was really hard to deal with as a child. Also, I was being molested very early on. It was one of my first memories. So I was a very unhappy child. I didn't understand why I had to be unhappy. I didn't understand why I was dealing with the things I was dealing with. But I was familiar with God, and I was always interested in God, and I never blamed God for what was happening. I knew it was people and not God that was making those things happen, and just circumstances, just life, you know. So I was fortunate to think that way. As I got older, things changed a lot, but sometimes it would be good, sometimes it would not be good, and the only thing I could count on was that I never knew what was going to happen next. There was no stability. I didn't feel safe or comfortable at any time because I felt like I couldn't trust anything. When I was around 10 years old, I did accept Jesus as my Savior, but I did not understand what to do after that. I felt unworthy and a lot of other bad things, and I didn't know how to deal with that. So I wasn't very secure as a Christian or a child of God, or however you want to say it. I just everything about it felt foreign to me. Love and safety and stability just wasn't something I was familiar with. I didn't know how to accept that, especially at that young age. Well, life did what it always does. It goes on. There's always new things to deal with. And things didn't get better, and so I got to a point where I didn't want to deal with life anymore. I considered suicide, but I didn't consider it very long because I didn't want to hurt my mother. I loved her very much. She was a very sweet person with a very tender heart and a kind soul. And she was really all I had, so I didn't want to hurt her, especially after what she went through with my dad. So what I did instead was turn to drugs and alcohol. I told you earlier, if you had seen my other testimony about smoking, smoking was something that I held on to also. But it wasn't the only thing. So I spent a few years really just not in touch with reality at all. And around the time I turned 18, I did decide that it wasn't the lifestyle I wanted. I was unhappy. I was tired. I felt I aged myself way more than I should be. I was 18 or 19. I felt 30. But I really didn't know how to change. You know, I still loved God. I still wanted to feel worthy of God, but I didn't. And this all came to a head when I turned 18 because I had a cousin that passed away very suddenly. It was very unexpected. It was a tragic accident. It was a shock to everyone, and he was someone that I really looked up to, and I felt that I could see myself in. You know, he was somebody that reminded me of myself in a lot of ways. So when he passed away, I felt the moment that I think everyone reaches, and it's the sense of mortality that you could die at any moment. It's just reality. We all know it. You know, we know it. But when it really hits you, it changes. It changes something in you. It changes the way you look at life. Now, up to that time, and I didn't realize it at that time, but up to that time, God had saved me many, many times. I just didn't know it. I should have died so many times. I really was very reckless. But when my cousin died and I realized, you know, I needed to think about who I am and what I'm doing and where I'm headed, my conclusion was that I was going to hell and there was nothing I could do about it because I couldn't change. When I read the Bible, I didn't really understand it. It felt like something I couldn't relate to. These stories were thousands of years old in an area of the world in a time that I could not connect with at all. That's how I felt. I understood that Jesus loved me, but what it felt like was I was one of billions of people that probably just kind of mixed in with everything else, and I wasn't up to par. That was always the end conclusion, was I wasn't good enough. So with that, I lost my fear of God, and I stopped being afraid because I felt like there was nothing to be afraid of. There was no way I could change it. You know, when you're afraid, it's because you're holding on to an idea that there's hope, and so I lost hope and I lost fear. But I still wanted to have some sort of control of my life because it did feel like it was completely out of control. Like, just not at that point that I was reckless like I used to be, but in the sense that nothing made any sense. There was no direction. There was no insight. There was no focus, no path. It was just like every day was like every other day, and it just didn't matter. And I hated that. I didn't like it. I also was the type of person that I've always wanted to understand the truth of things. Even if it was ugly, or even if I didn't like it, I wanted to understand why things were the way they were, because my life really didn't make any sense. And I thought, you know, if I could at least make sense of it, I could deal with it, I could cope. So I wanted to understand things. I studied a lot at that point. I studied psychology, and then I got into Eastern religions like Buddhism and Hinduism. I didn't study any of them exclusively for a very long time. I would go through one and then go through another and consider things. I studied Scientology at one point. And I was also meditating and experimenting. I also dabbled in witchcraft. I hate even saying that, but it's the truth, and I have to admit the truth. I did. And please understand, witchcraft is a lot more than just reading about spells or worshiping ancient gods. It's everything. It's everything in the spectrum. It's Um, it's that. It's studying astrology, studying numerology, working with tarot cards and Ouija boards, any kind of psychic, medium, all of it. Anytime you go to something besides God looking for answers that you do not have, that are supernatural, this is witchcraft, this is sorcery. It's completely forbidden in the Bible. God absolutely hates it. In case you didn't know, you need to know that. Everyone should know that. Whether you decide to get into those things or not, you need to know God absolutely hates it. So yeah, I was doing all of that stuff at the same time, really. Okay, so here is the point I'm getting to. You're gonna like this. I like it. So this particular day, now I had been meditating for a long time and I was really good at it, particularly because when I was young and being sexually abused, I would mentally detach from my body. So when I started meditating, it came pretty easy. It was easy to make my mind quiet. So I was good at it. So this particular day I started meditating and I was going to try something different, which was to start chanting. I'm not going to tell you what it was. And I was also going to try to engage my third eye. I won't get into the details of that. It really isn't necessary, except that I was trying to look into my sounds so ridiculous. I was trying to look into my forehead and break through with a visual of light. Okay, so this is what happened. I started to meditate, and as soon as I began the chant slash looking at my third eye, God spoke to me and he said, stop. I wasn't on drugs that day. I was not in a bad mood. It was not an unusual day. I had had plenty of rest. I thought about everything that could possibly have triggered me thinking that God had spoke to me that day, related to my own psychic, or thoughts or whatever, because I understand how all that works. And there really was nothing that would have caused that except that God decided to speak to me that day. So he said stop. I heard it in my ear. It was the sound of a man. I also heard it inside of my head, like in my brain. It was both at the same time. It was just like if somebody was sitting beside me and spoke into my ear. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a whisper. It was just a very normal tone of speaking, like I'm speaking now. Also, I got a vision, and the vision came with information. All of this happened simultaneously at the same time. The vision was me actually seeing what I was looking for with the focus of my third eye. Now, I had went into this meditation with the understanding that what I was trying to do was not going to be achieved that day, or maybe not in many days, but over a span of time, if ever. So I've seen this light that I was looking for, and this was the information that I got from God. It was, what you're doing is real. That's why I'm showing you this vision. You know you're not supposed to see this vision yet, but yet it is real. what you are doing is dangerous, and you are exposing yourself and inviting things into yourself that are going to hurt you and are very dangerous. So the word stop, the vision, and the information, which was not audible, it was like a printout in my mind. All this happened within a second, probably within half a second. And I knew it was God. There was no question. I was pretty stunned. I just kind of sat there for a minute. But what I got from that more than anything, which was what I really needed to know, was that God had not left me and I wasn't unworthy. I just was confused and understanding things incorrectly. So with that, things really changed for me. It took a long time, but my understanding was completely different. I felt much closer to the Lord than I had ever felt before. It was very personal at this point. I felt like He really, went out of His way and showed me who He is in a way that He didn't need to. There are a million ways God shows us who He is and that He is real and that He loves us, whether it's through our own creation or the creation of the earth or the universe, or the proof of the Bible and the sacrifice of Jesus and the resurrection and all of these things. God didn't have to do those things for us. We have so much joy in life, and all we have to do is embrace it. So God didn't have to do that for me, but He did. And I've been needing to share this in some way, and here I am, and I hope it does all of you some good, or at least makes you smile, or lets you know that God also loves you and you are not unworthy, and He's always there and waiting for you. Please do know He loves you dearly. Thank you for listening, and God bless you all, and maybe you'll hear from me soon. I'm not sure what other testimonies I need to give. I feel like I have a million of them. Every day God blesses me with something. It's wonderful. So thank you all, and know that God loves you very much.